بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this daily read-through in this blessed month of Ramadan of the work of Shaykh Ahmad Sa'ad, Contemplating the Quran, in which he explores the themes of each of the 30 parts of the blessed Quran, the 30 ajza or siparas of the blessed Quran. And given that this is the fifth night of Ramadan, we are now on the fifth of the fifth part, the fifth juz, which consists entirely of Surah An-Nisa, and the theme is the lordly exposition to safeguard humanity. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Man is a weak creature. He travels through earth by permission of Allah and moves in the cosmos by His command. He is never, therefore, without need for God's guidance, that he might be preserved from the things that lead to hostility and estrangement from his fellow man, and that he might be saved from making himself an object of God's wrath and an opponent of his Prophet ﷺ. Defiance of God and his Messenger pulls man towards humiliation and loss in this world, and total ruin in the hereafter. These verses, therefore, address man in a gentle, loving tone, to preserve him from the causes of such enmity. Firstly, God desires to make clear to the believer the path to rectitude, to guide him and to relent unto him, while simultaneously those enslaved by desire want to ruin, misguide, divert, and make him swerve by exploiting his weakness and inciting his base desires. Thus God informs us, God wishes to make clear to you and guide you to the ways of those who came before you, and to relent towards you. And follows this by saying, God desires to forgive you, but those who follow their base desires wish to make you deviate far away. It is better to follow the invitation that strengthens resolve and will, rather than one that feeds the base animalistic desires and inclinations of the lower self, which turn man, unbeknownst to himself, into a beast. As wealth is known to be one of the primary causes of enmity, God commands us not to consume it by illegitimate means, rather encouraging us to practice lawful trade as our means to livelihood. He calls to contentment over desiring that which is in the hands of others, verse 32, just as he later emphasizes the preservation of wealth through commanding the fulfillment of that which has been entrusted to their rightful owners by issuing it explicitly from himself. It's verse 58. Similarly, Allah has upheld spousal relations, which are one of the great manifestations of His mercy, but which are sometimes wrecked by oppression, ill conduct, and separation. And He has commanded safeguarding the husband's interests in their absence. It's verse 434. Appointing two arbitrators to reconcile between them, 35. He has also decreed the preservation of good relations between kinsfolk, neighbours and friends, and to spend on them to bring about mutual affection. That's verse 36. As some have said, do good to people and you will win their hearts. Allah has commanded the people of the book and the Muslims to distance themselves from the means to religious hatred, whether with one another or with their Lord. For this reason, He prohibited the distortion of religious texts, their meanings, and their contexts, as well as setting up partners with God and inventing falsehoods against Him, verse 48. He also prohibited the worship of idols, in verse 51, as well as an envy that leads to denial of blessings, in verse 55. He exhorted submitting to God and His Messenger, in verse 59, and accepting and obeying the Prophet ﷺ as the final arbiter. We sent no messenger, but that they are to be obeyed by the permission of God. Explaining that the reward of obeying the messenger is the ultimate triumph of being with him and his companionship on the day of judgment. Verse 69, may Allah grant all of us that. This section ends by emphasizing religious freedom and the prohibition of oppression on the basis of religion, in verse 75. God then highlights the sanctity of human life by prohibiting and criminalizing murder. He establishes a clear distinction between accidental killing or manslaughter and murder and their results in terms of this worldly and next worldly consequence in verse 92. He also discusses legal aspects relating to peace treaties and mutual covenants in verse 90, accentuating the fact that war in Islam is not about seizure of wealth, spilling of blood, or violating of people's dignity, but rather a means to repel enmity and avert hardship and oppression. Through such lordly ordinances, God sets aright conduct in war, further commanding that one withholds from fighting one who ceases hostility and extends their hand in peace. That's verse 94. Then God returns to commanding fairness and justice, even when dealing with enemies, that one may not make hostility a means to harm and oppress, for oppression is categorically prohibited in all circumstances. Verse 105. He reiterates the imperative to give charity, act excellently towards others, and hasten in the performance of goodly deeds, especially bringing about reconciliation between people. In fact, making this one of the greatest means of attaining blessings and doorways to tremendous good. That's verse 114. God then explicates for mankind the snares of Satan and the means by which he brings down the children of Adam. These are deceptive guidance, erecting vain hopes, and inciting them to alter God's creation. God stresses that those who follow him are people who have truly lost everything, in verse 119. This juz ends with the commandment to stand firmly upon the truth, adhere to justice, and abandon any filial attachments and ties, or familiar attachments and ties, that drive a person towards forsaking the truth and profligacy in animosity, in verse 135. He warns against keeping company with the hypocrites, and establishing the type of false friendship that will mutate into enmity in the next life. This juz concludes by exhorting to gratitude and explaining that God Most High does not desire to punish us, for he is merciful to us, desiring only that we rectify and purify our souls. That's verse 147. So there's some beautiful advice there on how to deal with people in general, how to conduct yourself in terms of your relationships with other people. And I hope that Allah grants us the ability to act on this, especially in this blessed month, and make it a habit in this month. Try to make this month a month where you foster good characteristics and put aside negative ones. My advice to you would be to pick one character trait that you know you need to change in order to make yourself a better person, to turn towards Allah, and work on that in this month. That character trait may be something to do with your relationship with God. It may be something to do with your relationship with God's creation. Pick one trait and work on it, and inshallah Allah will grant you success in that and make it a habit that you avoid it and replace all of our bad qualities with good qualities. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rahmatihi ya arhamar rahimin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.